So we're going to be solving absolute value equations here. But first we're going to talk about expressions with absolute value. So first this is just to evaluate the expression. And we have 8 minus the absolute value of 2n plus 5 if n is equal to negative 7. So we're just going to plug it in. Let me change colors here. I have 8 minus the absolute value of 2 times 7 plus 5. And 2 times 7 is 14. Negative 7, sorry. So that's negative 14. So 8 minus the absolute value of negative 14 plus 5. And negative 14 plus 5, one's positive, one's negative. So that's going to be negative 9. Keep the sign of the larger number. But don't change this to plus a positive here because it's the absolute value. Okay, you really first have to do that part first. And if you remember, absolute value is the distance away from 0 that the number is. So the distance away from 0 that negative 9 is positive 9. Most of y'all probably just remembered as it's always going to be positive because that's the easiest way. So this turns into 8 minus positive 9, which becomes negative 1. 8 minus 9, that means the 8 is a positive, the 9 is a negative. That minus is the sign on that 9. So different signs, subtract the numbers, keep the sign of the larger. So it's negative 1. So here's an easy one to solve. We're solving this equation, solving for x. So when you're solving, think about it. You're trying to find all the possibilities that x could be. So the absolute value of x to equal 4, well, that would mean x could be 4, because if I plug in 4 for x, that's true. But because it's the absolute value, think about what other number it could be. Because it's the distance away from x, it could also be negative 4. Because the absolute value of negative 4 is equal to 4 as well, so that works too. So when you have an absolute value equation, what you have to do is once you get the absolute value by itself, which in this case it is, you have to do x equals the positive of what's on the other side of the equation, but also x equals the negative of what's on the other side of the equation. So in this case, x is equal to 4 or x is equal to positive 4. Both of those work if I plug them back in. So in this one, it's not just that basic absolute value of x, but we're going to do the same thing. But first you have to get that absolute value by itself. So I have absolute value of 3x minus 2 plus 8 equals 1. And because this 8 here is not inside the absolute value, I have to get rid of that first by doing its inverse operation. So I'm going to subtract 8 from both sides. And what happens here, 1 minus 8 becomes negative 7. And what happens here is I have an absolute value equal to a negative. So what that means is that this is going to be no solution. Because once you get the absolute value by itself, and it should always equal a positive number, because the absolute value is always a positive. So whenever you get the absolute value by itself and it's a negative number, that's going to be no solution. It would sometimes maybe say never true. That would be another way to say it. Okay, so for this one, we're going to do the same thing. Let's get this absolute value by itself first. So because this 8 is not inside, I have to get rid of that. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to subtract 8 from both sides. Let me erase that real quick. We're going to subtract 8 from both sides. And I get the absolute value of x minus 100 is equal to 20 minus 8 is 12. And now that the absolute value is by itself, now I'm going to split it into that 2, because x minus 100 could equal 12. But if that x minus 100 equals negative 12, that would make this equation true as well. So you have to do x minus 100 equals positive 12 and x minus 100 equals negative 12. And when I add 100 to both sides to solve, this one becomes x equals 112. Add 100 to both sides. Now they're different signs, and I'm subtracting the two numbers. So if you go over here, you want to do some side work. The answer is going to be positive because the larger number is positive. Remember, you got to carry the 1, so 10 minus 2, and I'm carrying it from here. That makes this a 9. From that just becomes 9. 10 minus 2 is 8. 9 minus 1 is 8, so it's 88. And it's a positive, so I get 112 and positive 88. Okay, so here we're going to solve this one. Now, this absolute value, understand that it's not by itself. I have this 2 that's here. So I first need to divide by that 2. And because it's being multiplied to the absolute value, I'm trying to get the absolute value by itself. So because it's being multiplied with 2, I'm going to do the inverse operation and divide by 2. And I divide by 2 on this side. So that's going to take care of that one here. And on the right side, I need to divide into everything on that. So it divides into the 8x, so that's going to become 8x divided by 2 is 4x, and negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. Now I have x plus 10 in the absolute value is equal to 4x minus 8. So it's not just one constant over here anymore. I still need to do both parts. X plus 10 is equal to 4x minus 8, or x plus 10 is equal to negative 4x minus 8. Now it's important you put that in parentheses because it's not just the negative 4x, it's negative of the whole thing. Because what happens is that negative is going to be distributed into that parentheses. So to solve it from here, I'm going to subtract x and get those on one side. I'm going to add the 8 to bring that to the other side. The reason I'm doing it this way is so that my x stays a positive. You could have done it the other way, but I want all my x's on one side, all my constants on the other. So that makes this 3x is equal to 18. And now I can divide by 3, and I have x is equal to 18 divided by 3 is 6. So on this one, I have x plus 10 is equal to, and I'm going to distribute that. So negative 4x, and that's going to become plus 8. And so this time, I'm trying to keep my variables positive. I'm going to add the 4x. And it just helps, it makes it a little bit easier not dealing with negatives. 5x, that means I'm going to bring the constants to the right. Negative, that makes this negative 2. Divide by 5, and x is equal to negative 2 over 5. Now, before you use both of these as your solutions, you need to check for extraneous solutions. So when it gets like this and it says to check for extraneous solutions, you're going to have to plug both of them back in to check for extraneous solution. An extraneous solution is one that you did everything right and you got your answers, but might be a little fake out situation going on where one of them may not actually work. And the reason that is because of this absolute value. So when I plug in 6, I have 6 plus 10 is equal to 8 times 6 minus 16. Well, 6 plus 10 is 16. Absolute value of 16 is 16. 8 times 6 is 48. 48 minus 16 is 32. 2 times 16 is 32. So 32 is equal to 32. That one works. So x equals 6 is a solution. When I plug in negative 2/5, this one is going to be fractions. So I'm going to go over kind of some fraction work here. And so when I plug it in, 2 times, you have to plug it back into the original, not into this part, but back into the original one. 2 times negative 2/5 plus 10 is equal to 8 times negative 2/5 minus 16. So remember, when you're adding and subtracting with fractions, your denominators have to be the same. So I have to make this 10 over 1, and that's going to be negative 2/5 plus, and change that denominator to 5. So multiply both top and bottom by 5. 50 over 5. It's still 10, but you're writing it so I can combine these two. Multiplying a whole number with the fraction, well, you can make them both fractions. 8 over 1, multiply straight across. Multiplying fractions, you multiply straight across. So this is going to be negative 16 over 5 minus 16. Well, I'm going to have to get common denominator here again to combine those. 2 times the absolute value of 48 over 5, and that becomes positive 48 over 5. Negative 16 over 5 minus, this has got to be denominator 5, multiply numerator and denominator by 5. That's going to make this 80 over 5. So negative, negative, add the numbers. That becomes negative 96 over 5. Keep the sign negative. And just multiply straight across. 2 times 48 is 96 over 5 is equal to negative 96 over 5. These are different. This does not work. Okay? Positive 96 over 5 is not equal to negative 96 over 5. So the only solution here is x equals 6. What that means is that the negative 2/5 is an extraneous solution. Okay? Okay. All right. Here's some you try problems. Go ahead and try these on your own. You can pause it. I'll give you the answers in about 15 seconds after this hilarious joke. What did the 0 say to the 8? Hey, nice belt. Get it? He's wearing a belt. Squishing them in. All right. So your answers for the 3 you try problems are 1. Now, this one has to do with the mixed number, 3.5. You can change it to an improper fraction. That's what I used last time. Remember, multiply 2 times 3 plus 1 and do it that way, or you can use it as a mixed number. So the answer to this one is 1.5, or 1.5, or 3/2 would be fine also. Any of those. Number 2 is 3. And number 3, the answer is no solution. Or if you see it in the book when we get there, they're going to have no solution as the null set, which looks like this.